Who shot dead a school bully has found him not guilty of murder and will not do any jail time. Tsudzukani Mthombeni stole his police officer mother's service pistol and took it with him to school, where he fatally shot bully Nkululeko Ndlovu. Judge Bert Bam says Mtombeni is not a criminal and sentenced him to 7 years in prison, suspended for 5 on the count of culpable homicide. While Professor Irma Eloff is with the Department of Educational Psychology at the University of Pretoria. We chat to her now from our Hatfield studios. Good afternoon, Prof, and thank you for your time on the PM News Desk.
Good afternoon, Kirshni.
Bullying on the rise at some schools. Some stats, Prof, putting it as high as 3 out of 10 children falling victim. It does seem like a culture of bullying is permeating our schools. What constitutes bullying exactly?
Yes, we really do have a serious problem, Kirshni. Bullying is usually defined as unwanted aggressive behavior that can take the form either of ridicule or humiliation or intimidation. It can be verbal, it can also be physical or psychological, but what makes it bullying is that it is repeated over time, and that there's also what we call a social imbalance between the bully and the victim of the bully in terms of their social power or their social standing.
Speak to us about the long-term consequences for the victim and the bully.
The long-term consequences can be extremely serious. There's well-documented cases where of suicides over the long term in both the bullies as well as the victims, as well as violent behavior towards others. And then there's, of course, also the psychological effects of depression, social maladaptation, and all the social emotional problems that goes with that.
We do have a techno-savvy generation now, and this has brought with it new challenges. For example, cyberbullying, which is harassment on the phone, the internet, or via text messages. Why is this even more damaging to the victim's psyche than one-on-one bullying in the class or on the playground, for that matter?
The problem with cyberbullying is that it is much more invisible. With bullying itself, there will be incidents. It's visible, you can see it. And then with cyberbullying, it can often go on for a very long time before the adults in the situation actually realize that it's going on. And then there's, of course, also the easy access factor. Kids these days walk around with their cell phones and they have access to the internet on a daily basis. So it just opens up the ground for cyberbullying. I think it's much more prevalent than we do realize, and the statistics from the studies that is coming through is actually quite daunting. You know, quoting 3 to 4 adolescents having been victims of cyberbullying already.
Prof, what are some of the critical aspects that schools should take into account when strategizing anti-bullying interventions?
The big lesson there is that systemic, broad interventions is what's best. That's what works. Initially, when bullying started to rise, we tended to focus very much on the individuals that's involved, the bully themselves, the victim of the bully, and trying to understand the psychological dynamics that's going on there. What recent studies have shown is if there's a wide systemic intervention, say for instance in a school system, that can be very effective in bullying prevention, because most children aren't bullies. The bullies are outnumbered by far. So if we co-opt the other children, they are present when the adults are not present. And if we raise awareness about bullying, how do we define it, how do we deal with it, and we empower the children in an entire system to deal with that, there have been some studies that show that that's quite an effective intervention to prevent bullying.
How likely is it that this kind of aggressive behavior can become a pattern or habitual in bullies and indeed lead to perhaps criminal behavior and domestic violence perhaps later in life?
Unfortunately, studies show that if it's left untreated, bullies as children grow up to be grown-up bullies. So then you do have bullying in workplaces, you have bullying behavior in families, and it goes to the extreme of violence. So the earlier we intervene, the better.
Thank you, Prof. That was Professor Irma Eloff. She's with the Department of Educational Psychology at the University of Pretoria. Moving on to other news now. Clive Derby Lewis has been denied parole for alleged